Being sedentary for more than 4 hours, every hour after 4 hours a day that you're sedentary, you actually increase your death from all causes by 10%. So every hour being sedentary increases 10% all-cause mortality. And that's, think about it. You're sedentary for 6 hours, 7 hours, 8 hours. You have a 40% increased chance of death. It's a massive number.
I got to make some adjustments. So it's scary because what you just said, like 90% of people aren't doing, right? Everyone's just sitting at their desk all day or on the couch.
The food industry invented snacking for us, right? There was no such thing as snacking before the food industry. They just wanted to get you some more food. How do you get more food? Keep people hungry, right? So all this food keeps you hungry, and it's super tasty too, so you want more of it.
Why, if ultra-processed foods are so bad for us, why is it everywhere?
Back in the 40s and 50s, we thought that there was going to be a massive undersupply of food. So what happened was the president at the time instituted what's called the Farm Bill, where we subsidized farms to grow things like corn and wheat, etc. And so massive food industry to make food as cheap and as available as possible. And what that meant was to put preservatives in it, put other chemicals in it, so that you can store it on the shelves a long time. So now you have this business around food that's developed. It went from basically sustenance to an actual business. And just like in any other business, you have these massive corporations that are shoving these things onto the shelves, and it's kind of now ingrained into our economy.
What about things like melatonin gummies? I've heard that it's not great for you. What do you know about melatonin?
Yeah, it's not great. So in Europe, you can't get melatonin without a prescription.
Oh, yeah, wow.
In a lot of countries, you can't get melatonin without a prescription. It's a hormone. And so it is really crazy that our country allows this to be sold on the shelf, basically.
So I want to start by maybe zooming out a little bit and looking at what the most important pillars of health are. I'm sure we'll talk about a lot of details today, but let's start by maybe zooming out and just looking at it from a bird's eye view. What would you think are like the most 3 to 5 important pillars to health in general?
Yeah, it's so funny. So I actually have this entire paradigm I review with my patients called the wellness wheel, and we actually divide it up into 12. But I would say the most important out of those 12 are, of course, we have nutrition, we have our sleep, and then we have our movement. And movement includes a lot of different things, and we can dive into that a little bit later as our top 3 kind of lifestyle pillars. And then after that, I would say probably gut health and hormone health are the next 2 that I would focus on. And that's kind of the order I actually focus on it with my patients as well. So that's kind of where we start off on a physical basis. And of course, there's different pillars for mental health as well. But on a physical basis, those are the 5 we always start with.
Real quick, if you're like me and genetics are not on your side when it comes to hair loss, I have a product that might help. The folks at Cyanotic sent me this red light therapy hat that addresses the root cause of hair loss and hair thinning. You've probably heard about red light therapy before. Everyone's been talking about it recently, and there are numerous studies that show that it helps with hair thinning and hair loss. Here's how it works. The red light penetrates the scalp to stimulate hair follicles and helps them enter into the growth phase, which can lead to increased hair density and thickness. Red light therapy also increases blood flow to the scalp, delivering more oxygen and nutrients to the hair follicles. Improved circulation supports healthier hair growth. All you have to do is turn it on. As you can see, we have the red light there, and pick which setting you want. And then once you get your setting, you just put it on your head and you leave it there for around 30 minutes and do this around 3 to 4 times a week to see the best results. Red light therapy is completely safe, and actually this product in particular is FDA approved for hair loss. You can get a 10% discount if you use the code YoungAndAlive10 at checkout. Again, that's Young and Alive 10 for a 10% discount. In the description of this video, I put some links that go over the benefits and the science behind red light therapy for hair loss, just in case you want to do some more research before you make a purchase. Thank you to Cyanotic for sponsoring today's episode. So maybe we can start with diet. How important is diet actually? Like how much of an effect does it actually have on us? Is it a huge deal? Is it not that big of a deal?
So, what I always say with all these pillars of health is that there's about 20% of the information there that makes 80% of the difference. It's called the Pareto principle, right? And so what's really true about lifestyle, and when I say lifestyle, I mean diet, movement, and sleep, is They all move the needle a lot, but it's more about what you are eliminating from those three categories rather than putting in. So with diet, you're going to move the needle the most by eliminating ultra processed food. So this is all the food that's, devoid of any nutritional value, just hyper caloric, hyper palatable food that just you just keep eating a bunch of it. It comes in packages, it's mostly chemicals. So I would say diet can make a massive difference in your health, but really it's not about what you actually eat. I mean, obviously that's important. It's more about what you can eliminate from your diet, which is that ultra processed food.
And so why is it that why if ultra processed foods are so bad for us, why is it everywhere, right? I feel like it doesn't really make sense to me, right? That since everyone knows how bad this food is, but why is it everywhere?
Yeah, because it has a lot to do with the history of kind of our country and what kind of happened. Back in the 40s and 50s, we thought that there was going to be a massive undersupply of food. So what happened was the president at the time instituted what was called the Farm Bill, where we subsidized farms to grow things like corn and wheat, et cetera. And so with that came this entire massive food industry to make food as cheap and as available as possible. And what that meant was to put preservatives in it, put other chemicals in it, so that you can store it on the shelves a long time. So goal accomplished. We now have cheap food that will last forever and massive quantities of it so that everyone will have food for a long time, right? Goal achieved. However, what happened there was we totally created this massive industry that was based on profits. And so the goal also became to make foods less and less expensive and market it more and have people eat more. And so now you have this business around food that's developed. It went from basically sustenance to an actual business. And just like in any other business, you have these massive corporations that are shoving these things onto the shelves, and it's kind of now ingrained into our economy, right? I mean, the food industry is a massive part of our economy, bigger than the healthcare costs that we have. And so now we're kind of stuck with this system of this massive food industry that is just kind of pushing this stuff onto us with marketing, cheap food, making it hyper palatable, actually hire chemists to make it so that you can't stop eating it. And we have this massive oversupply of calories that needs to be sold to us.
So is it safe to say that, let's say, right, starting from today, we just go to completely organic, no more processed foods, it wouldn't be as profitable? Is that safe to say?
It wouldn't be as profitable for these food companies. Absolutely. I mean, what would they sell us, right? If we're just going to our local farmers market and buying all of our produce and getting locally sourced meats, then food companies go away. The food corporations go away. And absolutely, that would be a massive hit to their bottom line.
So we talk about what's not good for your diet. What are some foundations of a good diet? What should we be making sure that we're eating on a daily basis?
Sure. So I think there's been a lot of talk about all the word diet, right? There's so many diets that's been pushed on us, things like the Atkins diet and the carnivore diet and the vegan. I would just get rid of the word diet as something temporary that you do in your life. I think you really need to create a diet that is a lifestyle for you, that you always eat this way as much as you possibly can, now and forever. And there's really some foundational principles there that are true for almost everybody, which is where we are not eating enough protein. So we need to get at least a gram per pound of protein in our diet on a daily basis and divide it up into dosages over the course of the day. We're not getting enough vegetables. And so having about the same amount or even more of vegetables in our diet, and then some high quality fats. You really want fats that are high quality, and we could talk a little bit about what's a low quality fat, but things like fast food and trans fats are low quality, but things like avocados, salmon, nuts, those are going to give you high quality fats. So if you have those three components of your diet, and it could be any type of diet, it could be a lot of people refer to this as the Mediterranean diet or the paleo diet. You could call it what you want, but having a protein forward mentality, starting with protein, getting enough of it, making sure you have your vegetables in there as well. And I'm talking non-starchy vegetables. So I don't say carbs at all, right? Because vegetables are carbs. And so if you have enough vegetables to get yourself the fiber and the nutrients that you need, you're going to be healthy like within months, within weeks, actually. You're going to change your entire health around.
Something I've been trying to do recently is add some variety, right? Because I heard that's important from like previous guests. So how important is that variety? Because I mean, I'm the type of person where like if I'm stuck to my ways, I just eat the same things every single day. How important is that variety that we get some different things in our diet besides just the same things over and over again?
It's massively important, especially in your choice of fruits and vegetables. I think, fruits and vegetables have developed over the course of centuries in evolution to have this really unique combination in each one of these fruits and vegetables of phytonutrients and micronutrients that come together. We don't even know everything about how these elements interact with each other within each fruit and vegetable. And so with each one of these, we're getting different sources of vitamins and nutrition. And so the more variety you have in the vegetables that you're eating, I mean, some researchers say you should get 30 different types of fruits and vegetables in your diet every week. So really having a lot of variety there, I think is helpful. But even if you don't have a lot of variety, as long as you're sticking to the major principles, I think you're going to go most of the way. And then the variety just comes to provide additional taste and additional nutrient supplementation.
Yeah, there's something else I've past guests have said is that the most like thing that we're lacking the most is fiber.
Yeah.
What is the importance of fiber, and maybe what foods have the most fiber? Just so people listening to this can know what foods they should pick up at the grocery store, maybe.
Yeah, but that's exactly why I say vegetables, because all fiber is in vegetables. You don't get fiber in meat. You don't get fiber in carbohydrates for the most part. Some of them do, like if you're eating whole grains, but mainly it's going to come from your non-starchy vegetables. So all the non-starchy vegetables and fruits will get you fiber. And so that's why you need to have a good quantity. Some of the research actually shows to get your actual amount of fiber and nutrients that you need from vegetables, you need about 800 grams a day of vegetables. That's a lot of vegetables. It's like, 2 or 3 large salads a day. But, I think as long as you're getting a serving of vegetables with every meal and they're non-starchy, you're going to get the right amount of fiber.
No, I also heard, and I would love to confirm if this is true with you, that if you go from eating no fiber at all to eating a bunch of fiber, it not causes issues, but like, your gut doesn't do that well with that, correct?
Yeah, it takes your gut some time to accommodate. Fiber will cause some bloating if you're taking large dosages of it initially. So you have to kind of step it in if you're not doing any fiber at all for a while. You need to get your gut bacteria, your microbiome used to this fiber coming in. But your microbiome, to keep it healthy and to keep your gut healthy, it needs fiber. It needs to take that fiber. This fiber is the food of your microbiome, and it feeds your microbiome, feeds your healthy microbiome actually. So absolutely. And sometimes when your gut first starts getting it, that microbiome is so hungry for fiber that you get a lot of gas from it. But eventually your gut will accommodate, and you want to try to get up to about 30 to 40 grams of fiber in your diet a day.
So I would love to next go through maybe your typical diet, what you usually eat in a day, because I
Yeah.
feel like it's one thing to hear all these terms like fiber and like all the
Yeah.
carbohydrates, but I feel like people will resonate more if they can know like what exactly the foods are that contain these stuff. So maybe starting from breakfast, what does your breakfast usually look like, and is it the same or does it switch every day?
Yeah, Brian, I like to keep it super simple because the more choices I have to make, the more I get paralyzed by those choices,
Yeah.
So I pretty much have the same breakfast every single day, which is I have 3 eggs, I mix in some vegetables, and I scramble them up. That's it. And then with that, I get like a massive bowl of eggs with veggies in it. That's my breakfast every morning. I
Which
end up
what vegetables, if you don't mind me asking?
onions, bell peppers, tomatoes. I'll put some herbs and spices in there as well. And sometimes, I buy like the pre-cut vegetables at the supermarket that they come in the little boxes. I like that, or I'll just cut them up, whatever I have. I even put like things like squash in there. Whatever I have around in the fridge is what I use. And then I also take a big handful of blueberries. I love blueberries. Sometimes they're frozen, sometimes they're fresh, but I end it with that, and that's my breakfast pretty much every morning. If I don't have time to even make that, which is very rare, I do have a protein shake. I have different kinds of protein shakes, different bags, protein that you can buy, and I'll do that instead. But mostly I'll do eggs, vegetables, and blueberries for breakfast.
And what about after that? Do you go straight to dinner? Do you eat lunch as well?
So I do eat lunch. Yeah, I eat lunch, and I'll eat for every lunch. Once again, keeping it really simple. I just go to any restaurant, pick your restaurant, because I'm usually at work by lunch, right? So I have about 4 or 5 restaurants around here. I'll just get a salad with a piece of meat on it, either salmon or a piece of steak, something like that.
Are there any like recommendations for restaurants? I'm sure there's plenty in LA. I know you're in LA, but like, are there any like popular restaurant chains that are probably like the most healthy?
Yeah, so what I would say about restaurants in general is that most restaurants that you go to, like they are restaurants just like food companies. They need to maximize profits, right? So how do you maximize your profit? You get the lowest quality, the cheapest food you can find, and you turn that into food and you serve it to people, right? So sadly, in every community, there's going to be restaurants. Most of the restaurants are going to be doing that, right? So you need to do your research and find which restaurants are using locally sourced ingredients, which restaurants are not using seed oils, which restaurants are going to have the healthy choices on the menu, right? Most of the healthy choices come from the most simple preparations of food. Like I said, salads, right? And in LA, yes, we have a lot of restaurants that provide these types of foods pretty readily. So we're pretty lucky over here. We have one called Tokaya that I go to. There's Salad Barn. There's a few of these places here. But I think almost every community now you can find some places that'll have a pretty healthy salad, asking for a piece of meat. If that doesn't speak to you, then just get a piece of meat, a piece of chicken, piece of what have you, salmon, pork, beef, and a side of vegetables. Just keep it super simple. Don't try to get overly complicated, because once you start getting overly complicated, they mix in sauces, mix in ingredients that start deteriorating the quality of the food.
Now, what about for dinner? What do you usually do for dinner?
For dinner, usually what we'll have is you try to get a little bit more creative for dinner sometimes. So we'll try to do a recipe here and there. I have a few cookbooks around the house that I like, but usually if I don't have a lot of time, it'll be a piece of meat, a side of vegetables, and some fruits for dessert. Yeah.
What about snacking? Because something that I did that really helped recently is I just stopped buying snack food altogether. And
Best
so
thing
when I
you've ever
eat,
done.
it's just meals. Yeah. So what about snacking? What's the role of snacking in all of this? Because like you said, like most people with those processed chips, like they can just eat them all day and not even get hungry. How harmful can snacking actually be?
Yeah, so the food industry invented snacking for us, right? There was no such thing as snacking before the food industry. They just wanted to get you some more food. How do you get more food? Keep people hungry, right? So all this food keeps you hungry, and it's super tasty too, so you want more of it. So here's what I would say. If you're snacking, there's something wrong in the meals that you're eating, right? You're not getting fully satiated with your meals. You need to add more protein to your meals. Maybe add avocados, some fat to your meals, so you don't have to snack. Keep bumping up your meals to the point where snacking is not even something you think about. In the meanwhile, a great snack is something that is actually nutritious for you. So some vegetables with, some dipping sauce, some hummus maybe. You can also use nuts, are an incredible snack as well. So that's what I would snack on. These things are not going to spike your glucose, and they'll satiate you until the next meal.
Yeah, the reason I got rid of snacks is it's not because you're hungry, right? It's just because it's right there, and like you're
Yeah,
maybe like you're bored, you're not stimulated, so you just reach for
exactly.
the food. So I mean, do you is that something you recommend? Is like not buying like those chips and like those types of snack foods in general?
Absolutely. One of the jokes I make on stage sometimes when I'm doing speaking engagements is I ask people who here has a pantry, and everyone raises their hand. I'm like, okay, I want you to call your contractor and turn your pantry into a wine cellar, because what do you put in your pantry? Is all the snacks and crap that you buy, right? All the chips and cookies and all this stuff. So yeah, really good point. Just not having it around. One of the keys to habit formation, if you want to get rid of a bad habit, which I consider snacking one, is to make that invisible, right? So if you can't find it, you're not going to be able to do it. So if you can get rid of the snacks and just not buy them, that's going to serve you exponentially.
And it's tough because people think they need it, right? They think like, oh, I'll need some snacks for when I'm hungry throughout the day. But what you're saying is that like it's not really necessary. And so just to say back what you said, if you do your meals right, snacking won't even be necessary.
100%. Exactly. You should not, I have so many people that try to do intermittent fasting, right? And they're like, yeah, I intermittent fast, but then I get so hungry by the time it's my breaking fast time that I eat like a bunch of chips and a bunch of cookies, and I just eat whatever. I mean, that completely is eliminating the benefit that you're getting from the intermittent fasting. So you got to do your meals right. And if you're so hungry after fasting that you're that you're eating all this junk food, it's better not to fast. It's better to actually have the meal in the morning and not get hungry.
What about cheat days? Do you have any cheat days in there where maybe you have some dessert, or I know it's every once in a while is probably the best, but what's your opinion on cheat days in general?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I believe in the Pareto principle, the 80-20 rule, where 80% of the time, if you're following the program, you're going to make massive strides, and 20% of the times, maybe you don't. I think having an entire day where you're cheating is probably not as beneficial as having an occasional dessert every once in a while. Say you're out to dinner, you've eaten a good, healthy dinner, you order the dessert, that's fine. Give yourself some leeway in there, but instead of cheat days, I would say try to just keep it to cheat moments every once in a while over the course of the week.
Yeah, right. And it's like that habit forming that you mentioned. Like it's when you make it a habit of constantly eating foods like that, that's where the issues come. But it's like if you have it once a month, you'll be okay, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Right.
Yeah.
It's the law of compounding
So I want
effects.
to, yeah, exactly. And it's the same with stuff like exercise and just any other habit.
Yeah.
So I want to shift a little bit to brain health. Is there anything that we're doing right now that is destroying is like hurting our brain without us even realizing it?
We're doing a lot of things right now that are hurting our brain. One is having our phones with us all the time. Okay, so it's a constant source of distraction. Our brain wants to focus, and you're constantly distracting yourself. It's actually really hurting your mental health and your brain health in general. I think, grabbing our phone the first thing in the morning, having our phone next to us at bed before we go to bed, all those things are creating a state of hyper awareness and attention deficit that's hurting our brains. So I also think the overconsumption of information and not giving your brain a chance to process that information is also not helpful. Other things that we're doing to hurt our brain is eating, all the things we talked about, not sleeping enough, eating ultra processed food, not getting enough exercise. Those kind of things are just physiologically hurting our brain, but the habits that we're putting into our life that are negative are also hurting our mental capacity.
And are there any things we can do to increase our mental capacity, increase our cognitive functions?
Yeah, absolutely. Give your brain what it needs. And you know what your brain really loves as far as paying attention is doing things like reading a book and learning. Okay, so if you instead of reading off of social media and being all over the place and having like these 30-second bursts of information, actually grab a book and read like 10 pages and then sit there and think about it for a little while, maybe even like summarize it, and then talk about it to somebody else. That's the kind of mental loop, learning loop that your brain actually loves. It creates more brain connections. It actually grows neurons. It increases a brain hormone called BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, that actually causes brain growth.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I want to shift a little bit to exercise. What's the harm of being sedentary? Because I think it's safe to say that these days a lot more people are just at their computers, they're on the couch all the time. What's the harm in being sedentary?
Yeah, there's actually a really good research study out there that shows the actual harm of being sedentary. So being sedentary for more than 4 hours, every hour after 4 hours a day that you're sedentary, you actually increase your death from all causes by 10%. So every hour being sedentary increases 10% all-cause mortality. And that's, think about it. You're sedentary for 6 hours, 7 hours, 8 hours. You have a 40% increased chance of death. It's a massive number. And so being sedentary, as far as exercise goes, I tell people, don't even worry about exercising. The first thing I want you to do before you even get a gym membership is every hour that you are at your computer in the morning, every 45 minutes, set a timer on your computer or set a timer, just even set a timer on your phone. Or I even have people buy like those little egg timers that you wind up to 45 and put it next to their computer. 45 minutes, get up and walk around and either go eat, whether you do a little exercise break, like you do 10 squats or 10 push-ups or 10 sit-ups, you don't even have to do that. Just get up and go to the bathroom and walk around a little bit and come back. If you do that every 45 minutes, in the research, that's called an exercise snack. Exercise snacks totally negate the effect of sedentary behavior. And that's all you got to do. Every 45 minutes, get up and walk around for 5 to 10 minutes.
It's scary because what you just said, like 90% of people aren't doing, right? Everyone's just sitting at their desk all day or on the couch, and that's scary. And so it's important to get this information out there, right?
Yeah, the computer really did this to us, right? Like how many times I found myself doing this? You're in front of your computer for 2 hours before you get up sometimes, just kind of like going down a rabbit hole. And so I have this really nice app on my computer that I really recommend to everybody. It's this app called Flow. At 45 minutes, it turns off your entire screen. It makes it green, so you can't do anything. And it reminds you to stop, get up, and move around a little bit, And I love it. It's fantastic. I actually have a walking desk in my home where I walk and work at the same time, and that adds a lot of steps during the day, keeps the blood flowing. If you can do that, that's really a massive life hack.
And it's probably good for weight loss as well too, for anyone who's trying to lose some weight.
Yeah, absolutely. Like being in constant motion is excellent for keeping your mitochondria healthy and losing weight as well.
Yeah, because what a lot of people do too, and I mean, I'm kind of guilty of this, is you go to the gym, you're active for 2 hours, and then the rest of the day you're sitting at a desk and on a computer or on a couch. What is I mean, obviously 2 hours of activity is better than nothing,
Right.
but is that enough? Let's say I go to the gym for a couple hours, I run, I lift, and then I go home and sit on the couch all day. Is that also harmful?
Two completely different mechanisms. So you're still getting that 10% of increased mortality by being sedentary. Okay, that's still going to happen. The exercise then will, of course, decrease your mortality. But why not do both? And it's actually more important to not be sedentary than it is to exercise. So if you can be less sedentary, it's better. And then obviously, going to the gym has a lot of benefits. And even if you work out at home, there's going to be a lot of benefits, but it's not going to counteract the effects of being sedentary. So 8 hours of work sitting at a desk and then going to the gym, you're still doing yourself a massive disservice.
I got to make some adjustments. So if someone watching this is just completely sedentary, they're not going to the gym, they sit on the couch all day, they sit on their phone, maybe they're on their phone, maybe they're at their desk working. Can you dive a little deeper in what the harm of that is and what their future could look like if they keep on doing that?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you go to the CDC's website, right, or just Google CDC top 10 causes of death, right? Other than accidents and injuring yourself, all of the other top 10 causes, all 8 of them, things like Alzheimer's disease, things like COPD, heart attack, strokes, all of those have a much higher chance of occurring to you if you're sedentary. And the reason for that is all of these are rooted in what's called metabolic disease. Metabolic disease is basically a disease that forms from having way too much sugar, way too much carbohydrates, and being sedentary all day. And metabolic disease is the foundation of all these other diseases that eventually kill you. So what you're doing by being sedentary is you're increasing your risk of metabolic disease.
Wow. And so let's say someone is getting into exercising for the first time. What do you recommend for what they do exactly? Something I've heard is that like, as long as you're moving your body, I mean, strength training is important to build your muscles, but as long as you're moving your body, like it's still good. Do you recommend walking, running for someone just getting started? What do you recommend for them?
Yeah, so when I talk to my patients and they're totally sedentary and they have been for years, they've never gone to the gym, and they're like, look, I want to start. First thing we do is we make them less sedentary with that 45-minute rule. Second thing we do is we start them slow at the gym. Okay, we go 2 days a week. I just start with any habit, Brian. That you start small, you're much more likely to succeed, right? Small and simple. So I say, okay, we're going to work out twice a week for 30 minutes, and that's it. And if you start with that, whether it's at home or whether it's even going for a walk or it's going to the gym, much higher chance of success. And then in those 30 minutes, if they're going to the gym, what I have them do is just split it up 15 minutes of weightlifting and 15 minutes of some type of cardio. Okay. And what I normally recommend for them in that 15 minutes of cardio is get on the treadmill, do a little bit of an incline and walk at a 3 mile per hour pace. That's it. And over time, let's build up the incline and then let's build up the time. Then what I try to do is I try to add some frequency. So instead of adding more time to those 30-minute days, I say, let's see if we can get you back into the gym 3 days a week instead for 30 minutes. And then, so we add more times during the week that you're actually going. And then once we get you to at least 4 or 5 days a week in the gym, then we start adding minutes to each session, so 45 minutes. So that's how I build people up that have never, they've never worked out. So I call that they have a low training age. It means they basically haven't trained since high school or something. And that seems to be the most successful. And you got to meet people where they are. You can't put someone into the gym in a 45-minute strength training split routine right off the bat, right? You gotta get people to slowly ease their way into it and help them build this habit of going to the gym or even going for a walk or even working out at home. So and I think variety is extremely important. I think especially as we age, there's two things that we're losing. We're losing cardiovascular capacity and we're losing muscle mass. And so you have to do both strength training and cardio training.
Well, I feel like most people do is they get fired up, right? They're like, maybe it's a New Year's resolution. They get all fired up, like I'm going to go to the gym, I'm going to change my life, I'm going to turn around, and then maybe they work out a little too hard. And then, in my opinion, that's kind of creating you need a good relationship with these habits. And so I like that a lot of how maybe starting off smaller and then working your way up.
Just like any relationship, right? Like you want it to be sustainable. If you go really hard, really fast, it's going to crash and burn, right? And so starting off slow, starting off small is a really good way of building a habit. And the other kind of key to habit formation, there's one of the first things I teach all my patients, Brian, is how to form habits. Before we even talk about health and telling them what to do, is how to form habits. So there's 2 or 3 keys to forming habits. One of them we talked about is starting small and starting little bite-sized chunks. And then the second thing is have some kind of a reward afterwards, right? And that reward could be something simple. It could even be like, I get to write in my journal that I did this, or I fill out my habit tracker or workout log. Like if that feels like a reward, or maybe it's getting that first cup of morning coffee or something like that. But you have to build in some sort of reward that you're craving for after you do the habit. And before the habit, you have to have some sort of trigger. Like what's making you do the habit in the first place? So maybe going to the gym, it's the night before you lay out all your gym clothes and you wake up in the morning, you see your gym clothes. You're like, okay, I got to put them on and go to the gym. And so then you have to have a trigger and a reward for every habit as well. So once you do that and you form a habit, then you can start stacking other habits on top of it as well. So these are the keys to habit formation. I think if you can become an expert at forming habits, you're going to have a much better health journey just doing that first.
How many weeks of that do you think it takes to really turn it into a lifestyle? Because something like exercising, it can turn to something that like you almost force yourself to do, but then after a couple months of doing it, it just becomes like just what you do. You wake up, you go to the gym, like there's no questions about it.
Right. It's not really about the amount of weeks, it's the amount of reps. So what I always say, if you fit the most amount of reps into the most compressed period of time, you're going to form a habit a lot faster. Okay. So going to the gym, for example, people that go every other day is going to take them a lot longer time to form the habit, maybe 3 months. And going every other day, there's also a higher chance of failure of that habit formation. Okay. So rather, if you can build up to doing something on a daily basis, it's going to be much more conducive to be long lasting, but also compress the time period in which you form that habit. Okay. So, obviously going to the gym every day is very tough for people. As I mentioned, I start people off at 2 days a week. So it's going to take a lot longer if you're just doing it 2 days a week. I usually find it takes about 3 to 6 months to get into the habit after 2 days a week, but we're constantly building increased frequency into that time as well.
And something I think too, and I would love to get your thoughts on this, is that, like you said, the best reward is seeing the results. I feel like that's when people really get hooked, is when they see themselves lose weight, they see themselves gain more muscle, right?
Right. They get compliments, they feel good, They sleep better. All that stuff is the reward for sure. But you have to have your daily reward too, right? You have to give yourself something that you kind of anchor to psychologically after the habit's done.
Yeah, because in those early stages, you're not seeing those results very much.
Right. Absolutely.
There's like first couple weeks.
Yeah, a great book called Atomic Habits, where he talks about when you're first forming a habit, it's never linear. It's like this curve of the habit forming, right? And that first few weeks is this like area of despair in that graph because you're like not seeing any results. And the key is to stick with it because you'll hit this inflection point where you'll start seeing like incredible results and like faster results. And you just got to stick with it.
But what if someone says, "But Dr. Shah, I don't have time to work out"? What do you say to that person?
I say if you either put the time in now or you're taking it off the end of your life, it's either put the time in now or you just pay for it to the end of your life. And so look, it's easy for me to say that, but in reality we actually sit down with our clients and our patients and we look at their schedule and we say, what's our long-term plan here? How are we going to put time in to make this happen? It's going to take giving up certain things, and it might take you a few months to wrap your schedule around this, but it has to be done.
Or there's some sacrifices you need to make.
That's
For
exactly
example,
right.
waking up a little earlier, going to bed a little later. So, I mean, there's some sacrifices, but they're worthwhile, those
Yeah,
sacrifices.
absolutely. Those sacrifices are necessary. And it really shouldn't even be a sacrifice. This is all things that humans should be doing, right?
Yeah.
just like
Yeah.
it's like you make time to eat, you got to make time to work out, you got to make time
Yeah.
to, right?
Yeah. So, I've heard you say that you went through a period of time where you got around 4 hours of sleep a night. What did this do to you?
Yeah. So, I mean, it was a period of time that I was working really hard. I'm an entrepreneur. I started a business. The business got really busy, and then I started a family. And so, what happens in those moments of life, usually in your 30s and 40s, is that you put all your energy towards building a life, and you end up making yourself your last priority. And that's exactly what I did. And so I wasn't sleeping maybe 3, 4 hours a night. I was stressed. I was eating whatever, and I got super sick. I got multiple disease diagnoses. I had high blood pressure. I was obese. I was 40 pounds overweight. I also was pre-diabetic and had an autoimmune disease as well. And so I found myself super sick from not just the lack of sleep, but also the stress and the diet and the sedentary behavior, lack of exercise.
So, was this lack of sleep? So, was it more of you were not able to fall asleep, you're not able to stay asleep, or were you just working those those like 4 other hours you should have been sleeping?
A lot of it was self-induced, like it was work, but it was also stress keeping me up at night, and waking me up in the middle of the night. And I would wake up in the middle of the night and not be able to go back to sleep, so I just get up and start working again. So a lot of it was self-induced, but also some of it was, stress, eating late. I would eat really late, and then I wouldn't be able to sleep because of that as well. So a lot of it was also physiologic as well.
What's the science behind that eating too late? Why did that keep you up?
Yeah, so when you eat too late, a couple of different things are happening. Number one is that you get your gut working again, and rather than giving your gut a rest, your gut is now having to work, and that keeps you up. I also had reflux from this as well. So eating, that's where you get acid reflux as well, and so that would happen. And this also led to some sleep apnea too, where eating too late is sleep apnea is where you stop breathing actually for a few seconds at night because you're kind of snoring really, really deeply, and that was another issue as well.
So besides eating too late, are there any other don'ts that people are maybe doing that they don't realize is harming their sleep? Is there anything maybe, for example, I know one is checking your phone before bed. Are there any other don'ts like that people shouldn't do?
Yeah, absolutely. So whenever we also have whenever I spend time with patients, I talk to them about their sleep. It's an entire session, and we focus on two aspects of getting good sleep. One is your sleep routine, and the second one is your sleep environment. So with your environment, you want your sleep environment, which is your bedroom, to be as close to a cold, dark cave like our ancestors slept as possible. So darkness means you want it to be fully dark in the room. No lights, no alarm clocks, but also you want to kind of decreased amount of light that you're exposed to 2 hours before bedtime. So that means, turning off all those big, bright fluorescent lights you have in your home and instead going to more of a red light or an orange light. So change some of the bulbs in your bedroom maybe to an orange light before you go to bed. Staying off your phone. Cold, you want to keep it as cold as possible that you can still sleep in your bedroom. So 65 degrees is kind of what to aim for. And quiet. So if you can't make it fully quiet, a noise machine works really well, a white noise machine. That works really well to kind of simulate a quiet environment in your brain. And then your routine is also super important too. And the most important part about your routine is 2 hours before bed, you got to start winding down, staying off your devices, stop working, do something like reading a book, but you got to wind down 2 hours before bedtime.
Yeah, so there's people struggle maybe with, and this is something that you said that you struggled with, is going to bed in the first place, and then there's also waking up in the middle of the night. So starting with going to bed in the first place, what would you recommend to someone? Is there anything else they can do to make sure that they're able to actually fall asleep?
Yeah, yeah. So, I think first thing is knowing your chronotype. And your chronotype is like when are you genetically programmed to want to go to bed? And there's some night owls that need to go to bed a little bit later. And so if you're into bed too early and you're a night owl, you're going to really struggle for a few couple of hours going to bed. And the opposite's also true. Like some people need to go to bed at 9 p.m., because that's just when they're naturally programmed to fall asleep. So, I think going by your chronotype is super important, but also I would say consider there's some supplements that are really helpful to sleep. One of them is magnesium. So taking some magnesium before you go to bed is going to be really helpful to just kind of get your brain into that sleep state.
What about things like melatonin gummies? I've heard that it's not great for you. What do you know about melatonin?
Yeah, it's not great. So, I mean, melatonin is a natural hormone that your body secretes in order to start that sleep cycle, okay? But your body should be naturally making this. If your body's not making enough melatonin, there's a reason why. And that reason is usually because you're on your phone, because you're exposed to bright lights, because, you're too hyperstimulated. And so taking some exogenous melatonin in a gummy, you're just kind of masking the problem rather than fixing the problem, right? And so what will happen with melatonin is number one, most people take way too much melatonin. You definitely don't want to take more than 1 milligram of melatonin. Most people take like 3 to 5. But also, what will happen is you'll start suppressing your natural melatonin secretion over time. So your body doesn't ever get a chance to get normal melatonin secretion. So you got to fix a problem rather than take melatonin to mask the problem.
And it's crazy because I mean, it's like you said, it's in these like gummies. They taste
I
kind
know.
of good. They're
Yeah,
just so you can just get them at the CVS.
I
Why
know.
is stuff like that so available if it's not good for our sleep?
Yeah, it's crazy. Melatonin, especially because in Europe, you can't get melatonin without a prescription.
Oh
Yeah, in a
wow.
lot of countries, you can't get melatonin without a prescription. It's a hormone. And so it is really crazy that our country allows this to be sold on the shelf, basically. Look, melatonin has a lot of great uses too. Like I use melatonin a lot to combat jet lag when I'm flying to different time zones. But I think that you want to be really careful with melatonin. And unfortunately, you're right, it's too available. People can buy it. People don't know a lot. It's attractive packaging. It tastes good. And people just overuse it.
It even says on the label, like don't take for more than a month. So like
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
tough. It's crazy that the stuff is just out there, right?
It is. It is. Well, that's why it's great you're doing these podcasts, Brian, because you're
Yeah.
educating people on, to beware of these things. There's so many things out there that is actually harming our health, and unfortunately, they're so available.
Now, what about someone who wakes up a lot in the middle of the night? So obviously there's stuff that maybe they have neighbors that wake them up in the middle of the night. Maybe there's like a dog. But if they don't have that stuff and they just keep on waking up in the middle of the night, what's going on there?
Yeah. So there's a couple of things there. One is a lot of people are going to bed with anxiety and thoughts in their head that keep them up. And so I have my patients put a journal next to their bed. So if they do wake up in the middle of the night with a thought or something they need to take care of, rather than allowing that to keep them awake, they can just write it down real quick and know it's going to be there in the morning and allow them to clear their head. The second thing I would say is that electronics before bed also creates that problem a lot. So really making sure you're staying off your device for an hour before bedtime is important. Lastly, what I would say is if you do wake up in the middle of the night, don't get up and go to the bathroom. Okay, I think a lot of people do that. What that does, that raises your heart rate. And once your heart rate goes up, it's a signal for your brain to wake up. And so if you can stay in bed rather than going to the bathroom, you'll have a lot easier time falling asleep. However, if you're just laying there and it's a half hour passes and your mind is racing, then you do want to get up, do something different like read a book, and then try to go back to bed after that.
Now, what about trying not to drink water right before bed? Because I feel like that's another reason why people wake up is because they have to use the bathroom. Is that something we should avoid? Is drinking a lot of water before bed?
Absolutely. Your last meal and your last drink of water should be 2 or 3 hours before bedtime.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
So something that a lack of sleep can lead to is burnout. So besides just getting like we just talked about with all the sleep advice, is there anything else we can do to avoid burnout?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of reasons for burnout, right? I think a lot of times we get burned out by doing the same things over and over again, not taking a break. It's so important to build breaks into your schedule. Your brain needs it, your body needs it, and I like to talk about breaks as hourly breaks, like we talked about, like every 45 minutes, take a break. Not only does it clear your mind, it reduces your cortisol levels, and you're not sedentary. So there's a lot of great benefits to taking a break every hour. You want to take a break every day, I think everyone needs to have some time for self-care on a daily basis, whether you're going to the gym or you're even just, at home reading a book or meditating, whatever have you. During your weekends, a lot of people hard charge their way through the weekends, whether they're, working out really hard or even just working through the weekends. There needs to be at least a few hours of self-care and just wind down time. And then you got to take your vacations. I think we're down to, what is it, 2 weeks a year of vacation now
Yeah.
in the United
Yeah.
States. Like that's
A lot of people
unheard
don't
of.
even take it, right? A lot of people just
Right.
don't even take it. Yeah.
Exactly. A lot of people don't even take their vacations. And, once again, I'll mention Europe again. They have 8 weeks of vacation a year in some countries. And so really just trying to build those vacations into your schedule and winding down, I think it's extremely important to avoid burnout. Taking all of these breaks, got to do it.
I want to move on to alcohol. Many people drink alcohol very casually. What are the negative effects of maybe even drinking a little bit of alcohol, let alone a lot?
Yeah, everyone's biology is so different on this. And so I think that absolutely there's no health benefits to drinking alcohol. Let's make that clear. Okay. So I know the alcohol companies have been trying to sell us for a while, like maybe some wine every day will help your heart. The only potential benefit is reducing your stress level. And that could potentially have benefits to like a circuitous route there. But what I would say is everyone has a different level of where alcohol could actually cause physiological damage. Obviously, the bigger you are, the less likely a small amount of alcohol will cause physical damage. However, some people do lack enzymes to metabolize alcohol as well. And so that number is going to be different for everybody. So following your liver enzymes, for example, will really help you determine where your liver is with alcohol consumption. I'm very realistic with my patients about alcohol. I know that, I can't tell people don't drink because it's just not going to happen for 90% of the people that are already drinking. What I try to get people to do is try to stick to less than a drink or two when they do drink, not to drink every day, right? So try to drink only on social occasions or maybe limit it to the weekend. And if you do binge drink, which binge means more than 4 beverages, take a few days off to counteract the effects of the binge. So if you binge on a Friday, maybe take Saturday, Sunday, all the way up to the following Friday off. I think those are the kind of the high level tips I give people around alcohol. And that seems to work for most people to keep their liver healthy.
Now, what do you say to that, like early 20-something-year-old kid that's like, I'm young, I'll be fine, it's okay. What do you say to that person? I'm in college, everyone's doing it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, look, our younger bodies are much more resilient to everything, right? I mean, we're just machines when we're in our 20s, and we can do pretty much anything. And what I would say though is there's two problems with this. Number one is that you are building a mental model around alcohol that it's okay for you, and you're not limiting it right now, and you're kind of living this carefree life. And this mental model is going to follow you throughout the rest of your years. So it'll be hard for you to detach from that mental model in your 30s and 40s when is actually causing real damage, right? And secondly, what I would say is that the chance of you having some sort of accident that can cause physical harm to you is greatly increased with alcohol, whether it be drunk driving or falling, etc. And so if you look at the causes of death on the CDC website, in your 20s, most of the death is from accidents, which most of that is associated to alcohol use. Okay. And so you're really increasing your chance of death as well in your 20s by drinking all the time. So that's another massive concern, obviously, right?
Yeah. And so if someone was going to drink, what would be the healthiest combination for them? Obviously, ideally nothing, but if they were to drink, what's the healthiest thing they could drink?
I mean, I would say, you want to avoid drinks that have a lot of sugar in them, basically. So mixed drinks, wine, especially white wine, has a lot of sugar, and you also want to. Some people have a lot of gluten allergies and stuff, so avoiding beers and things like that is also beneficial for some people for their gut health. So I would maybe just stick to like the clear forms of alcohol and really dilute it down. Things like tequila, those types of things, vodka.
So you talked a little bit earlier how there's so much information out there that's just getting thrown at us. How do we know who to trust? Because especially online, like there's just so much information, there's so many experts. How do we know who to trust?
Yeah, it's really difficult right now. There's so much information out there. And I think one of the benefits of there being a lot of information is that it's becoming evident who has the credentials and the background and the research to really believe what they're saying versus the people that are just saying random things, right? And you can kind of almost tell that there is you got to tell just intuitively that there's a disparity in the information there. But I think a lot of people are now posting the research studies that they are referring to, which is really good. Anytime you see PMID, that's actually referring to a research study that you can actually go online and look up that PMID, and it'll take you to PubMed, which is an online source of all the research, and you can go to those studies and actually get a citation to look at. And so I think that has some credibility. I think obviously people that have been educated in the field have a lot of credibility. And then you got to just make sure you do your own research into the people that are giving you the information. You have to make sure you really know that person is credentialed and they really do know what they're talking about.
So speaking of this, what do you think is probably the worst thing you've seen online? The worst health advice where you saw it and you were almost like taken aback, like that's not true. Have you seen anything like that out there?
Oh, there's so much stuff, Brian. It's just terrible at what's out there. I think there's a lot of kind of like militant advice around diet, right? And you have people that are like really hardcore one diet or the other. And I think that does people a lot of disservice because it gets people paralyzed by all the conflicting dietary advice. And so everyone's biology is different. And even the word diet, I want to like try to get people to eliminate that. Whatever you're eating, it should be a sustainable lifestyle for you forever. It shouldn't just be a 6-week program or a cleanse or whatever. It needs to be something sustainable that number one, you love to eat. Number two, it provides positive biological responses. And number three, you gain muscle and you lose fat, right? And so that's what we all want. And so if you can find that right diet for you, and this is where I really work a lot with our patients using their blood tests and also talking to them and doing different experiments on diet, we can find the right diet for you that you can stick to forever.
Yeah, it's tough because I feel like the stuff that's true doesn't really make the best YouTube titles. They don't really make the best YouTube thumbnails.
Exactly.
Exactly,
Boring.
yeah. But it's the stuff like the crazy claims, like get a 6-pack in like 5 weeks. Like this is crazy claims that get all the clicks, right?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I know. We're living in a world of clickbait, and some stuff is obvious. Six pack in 6 weeks is just, makes zero sense to me and to most people, hopefully. And if they are creating that, they're definitely doing something that is, definitely doing something that's not going to work for everybody. So, got to be careful there. Could be potentially dangerous too.
Absolutely. And so what would you overall, let's say someone is they're in their late teens, early 20s, maybe mid to late 20s. What advice would you give to them to make sure that their health is good long term? Because I feel like we talked about a little bit earlier, like people that are younger tend to just be like, oh, I'll be fine. Like I'll be okay. Like, cause they're so resilient in that way. But what would you tell them to make sure that they're not struggling when they're an adult?
Yeah, absolutely. So here's something to realize is that when you're in your early 20s, you're at your peak state of health. This is as good as it's going to get for you, for biologically, at least internally. Okay. So one thing that you should do in your 20s is you should get a full set of like blood work done. A lot of people don't have this. You want to get your blood work done, your hormone levels done, and really make sure, number one, everything is not just normal, is optimal. If there's something that's not optimal, you need to start working on that now because you can fix it in your 20s, whereas in your 30s and 40s, you're going to have to be put on medication to fix that, right? And so a lot of times all these diseases develop starting in your 20s. That's when you start developing disease, heart disease, metabolic disease, etc. But you can correct it directionally in your 20s as well. So you want to get your full set of blood work done at this point in time. Secondly, you want to start educating yourself in your 20s about what is healthy and what is not. Specifically, healthy food, healthy exercise, healthy sleep. Get one book on each one of those topics. Read those books, and the fourth book I would read is a book on forming habits. Those 4 books will change your life because not only are you going to live longer and not get disease, but you're also going to feel incredible for the rest of your life versus having these like I did. I felt terrible. And I'm a doctor because we didn't get sleep, nutrition, and exercise advice in medical school, right? So I didn't know, and I went down the wrong path for 10, 15 years before I pulled myself out of it. If you don't want to suffer for 10 or 15 years, you got to educate yourself in your 20s. And so getting 4 books along those topics, extremely beneficial. And then thirdly, I would say if you don't have a health routine in place in your 20s, it's going to be so much harder to get one in place in your 30s and even more difficult in your 40s. So start developing your routine in your 20s. It's an incredibly critical time in your life where you could change the course of the rest of your life if you start doing it then.
So that's health. What about career success? What would you tell someone that's in that age range that wants to see some sort of success in their future? What would your best advice be for them?
Yeah, I would say that one concept to wrap your head around is the concept of the postponement of pleasure. Okay. And so what I mean by that is really dedicate yourself in your 20s to creating something of long lasting value and putting some money in the bank and saving it. And the exponential nature of interest is like one of the miracles of the world. Einstein said this. Getting some money in the bank, having that start exponentially growing in your 20s is going to be a massive nest egg for you no matter what in the future, right? I also think postponement of pleasure. I think what happens in your 20s is you make some money and you're like, oh man, I want that really great car. I want that really cool apartment. And you spend a lot of your money on these things and maybe you go into debt, maybe you get credit cards, and really getting your head wrapped around more of a stoic mentality where you don't need those things yet. You'll have all of that in your future. It's going to be incredibly beneficial, not just for your pocketbook, but also because you're not distracting yourself with all these things. You have more time available to do things like read, to learn, to make money, and to dive into your business, right? Because all those things that you buy distract you, your time and your energy and your focus from those things. So I would say those are like 2 overarching principles and the third thing is in your 20s, you're probably the smartest that you will ever be. It's the time where your brain forms the most brain connections. So the more good information you can feed your brain in your 20s, the more of that you'll retain and you'll be able to make use of and form connections. And so the more you can learn. And so read an hour every single day in your 20s. It's going to make a massive difference. Nonfiction, of course. It's going to make a massive difference too.
What do you think is the biggest misconception that young people have about being an adult? Is there anything you can think about?
Yeah, I think young people, and I was guilty of this too. You think you can deal with problems better when you're in your 30s and your 40s maybe, and that's like I'll just do whatever I need to right now. I'll worry about those things later, right? And so, financial problems, health problems, all of this stuff does not get any easier to deal with in your 30s and 40s. It gets much harder to deal with in your 30s and your 40s because now you don't have 20 years of runway to get your ship pointed in the right direction, right? I always like to use an analogy of a ship sailing or even a plane flying from London to LA. If it's 1 degree off, it's going to land in Mexico, And so you really need to get your ship corrected early, both up here in your brain, between your ears and in your health and in your habits way early to get in the direction that you want to go. Things don't get any easier later on in life.
And I feel like the stakes get a little higher too, because a lot of times it's not just you that you're doing stuff for, because I feel like when you're in your 20s, it's like it's like focused on you. You don't really have kids, like you don't have kids to take care of, and and I feel like the stakes are a lot lower when you're just on the line. But when there's other human beings on the line that you have to provide for, that's a whole different story, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's like before you have children, like when all your time is your own, you're actually leading the life of like three different people in one time period. You have like 3x the amount of time there because you can put all that energy into yourself, and you won't have that once you have children and you have a steady job or whatever. All that kind of goes away. So use that time period effectively.
So my last question is, if you had a minute with your younger self, what would you tell him?
All the things that I just talked to you about. But I think for me, when I was young, I did work really, really hard. But even, being a doctor, I had no education on how to take care of myself. And I made myself the last priority in every single priority stack. It was always like school, family, me on the bottom, and then it was my kids and my work and then me at the bottom. And I think if I would be able to go back in time and say, Darshan, no matter what, you need to spend an hour on yourself every single day. I think that would have made a massive difference in my life. And so I think giving yourself the leeway to focus on yourself for the rest of your life, I think is a really good idea for at least an hour a day. Make yourself a priority. Get your self care in no matter what.